Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When ex-Marshal Ryan leaves his off-grid home for a supply run, 3 HOA zealots break in, armed with arrogance and fake authority. But they picked the wrong house and the wrong Marines. What starts as trespassing ignites a war for justice, land, and freedom. And Ryan, he's just getting started. The morning started like most of my Saturdays, coffee in a to-go thermos, checklist on the dash, and the quiet rumble of my truck winding down Highway 17. I had a supply run planned, some parts for the generator, more 308 rounds for the fall season, and a damn good excuse to escape cell signal for a few hours. My friends, Miles, Travis, and Kowalski, were holding down the fort back home, which meant my property was in the best hands possible short of hiring Cerberus himself. These 3 weren't your average house guests. All former Marines, all with tours longer than most marriages, and all fiercely loyal. We served together in Iraq, and since then, they'd become the kind of men you call when things get weird, wild, or flat out wrong. I'd invited them out for a long weekend, beers, barbecue, and maybe some time at the range. We were overdue for it. Around 10 past 10. Somewhere between the ammo depot and an overpriced hardware store that reeked of cedar-scented marketing, my phone vibrated. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what it said. Perimeter alert. Lock disengaged. Front gate. No access code used. I frowned and tapped into the feed. My cameras should have been streaming live from the main gate, but the video flickered black, then cut entirely. That's when my gut tightened. Another ping, this time from the side camera facing the road bend. Grainy but clear enough. 3 figures walking across the threshold of my gate, stepping right over the snapped-off padlock like it was a twig. 2 men, 1 woman, all in polo shirts with the Emerald Canyon Estates HOA logo stitched proudly over their left pecs. The woman had a smug stride and a silver tablet in her hand. I knew that face. Karen Lewis, self-appointed president of the HOA from across the boundary line. Her voice carried loud and clear through the mic. He was instructed to vacate the property today. We've received complaints and have authority to perform a wellness inspection. Give us 4 hours. Take photos of everything. Document deviations. I nearly choked on my coffee. I wasn't a member of their HOA. Never had been. My land was grandfathered out, legally, permanently, and with more documentation than the Pentagon. They knew it. Hell, I'd personally handed them copies 2 years ago when they tried to fine me for painting my own mailbox. And now here they were, cutting locks and stomping onto 9 acres of clearly posted private land, without a warrant, without a deputy, and without a brain between the 3 of them. I immediately opened the secure channel to the house, a private frequency on encrypted radios I'd set up for situations just like this. Miles picked up. "Yo, we've got company," he said before I could even speak. "How many?" 3. HOA. Dumb and Dumber with their queen bee. "You armed?" A pause, followed by a faint chuckle. Kowalski's cleaning his rifle in the kitchen. Travis is watching from the second floor with a GoPro. "We got it covered. Don't engage unless they come inside," I said. "I'm heading back now. Call the sheriff. Get it on record." "Copy that. You want me to make coffee?" I didn't respond. My jaw was clenched hard enough to crack teeth. I yanked the wheel and gunned the truck onto the gravel shoulder, flipped around, and tore back toward the house, tires chewing up the dirt like I was chasing down a fugitive. My hands were steady, but my thoughts were boiling over. This wasn't just trespassing. This was organized, premeditated, and bold. They'd chosen the one day I was out. They knew my property was defensible, off-grid, and under surveillance. And yet, they walked in like they were flipping through a Home Depot catalog, acting like they had jurisdiction over something they had no legal right to touch. Cutting my lock was bad, walking onto my land was worse, but opening my door, that was a line they really didn't want to cross. By the time Karen and her 2 meathead sidekicks reached the house, Travis had already locked the front door and posted up in the upstairs hall with a pair of binoculars and his phone camera rolling. Kowalski, never one to miss the action, had set aside his rifle cleaning kit and was standing just inside the rear entrance, cradling a semi-auto in a relaxed but unmistakably ready position, not pointed at the door, but not exactly hidden either. Miles, cool as ice, stood by the kitchen window, sipping coffee like it was a lazy Sunday morning. The first knock wasn't a knock, it was a push. Then a second, then came the unmistakable click of the back door handle turning. It didn't budge. Karen's voice followed. "Hello, HOA inspection. We just need a moment of your time." They waited maybe 3 seconds. Then the lock rattled harder. Kowalski stepped forward and pulled the door open an inch, enough to see, not enough to invite. Karen looked up and instantly froze. The smile she'd rehearsed in front of her bathroom mirror probably 100 times vanished like a light bulb popping. Her gaze traveled from Kowalski's towering frame to the matte finish of the firearm hanging in his arms. He wasn't aiming, but it wasn't ambiguous. "Ma'am," he said in that steady, bulletproof tone only a Marine could deliver, "this is private property. You just broke in. Step back off the stoop." One of the HOA officers, short, neck like a tree stump, took a single step forward. "Whoa there, you threatening us with a gun? That's assault. We'll call the cops right now." Travis's voice crackled in from upstairs. "Already did. Sheriff's en route. Guess what I told them? 3 intruders, illegal entry, property damage, and attempted home invasion." Karen blinked rapidly, trying to regroup. "This is a scheduled compliance audit. We received complaints. We have full authority. Section 9.4 of HOA Code allows for emergency inspections." "Which doesn't apply here," Miles cut in, walking casually into view. "This isn't HOA property. This house isn't under your jurisdiction. You're trespassing. Want to see the boundary markers? We've got 5. Karen shook her head, trying to cut through the wall of facts with her favorite weapon, denial. "We were told, clearly told, that this lot was within the extended HOA overlay. We have authority to perform a visual compliance check if there are suspected code violations." Travis laughed from above. "Lady, you're not with the FBI. You're with a homeowners committee. You think you get to raid someone's house over a cracked fence post." The second HOA guy, taller and twitchier than the first, suddenly lunged forward and shoved Kowalski's arm, shouting, "Get that gun down! You can't have that!" "Bad move." In less than a breath, Kowalski spun him with a grip on the wrist and slammed him chest first into the deck. The guy went down hard, grunting as his breath escaped him. In a single smooth motion, Kowalski zip-tied his wrists with a plastic restraint from his belt. Karen screamed, "You can't do that! You can't restrain people! That's illegal." Miles stepped into her path, coffee in one hand, badge in the other, his federal contractor ID. "You entered illegally. You bypassed a secured gate, broke private property, and attempted to enter a home uninvited. We have it all on tape, and your friend just made physical contact inside a restricted area. We are well within our rights to perform a citizen's arrest until law enforcement arrives." Karen backed up, trembling now, looking between the bodies on the porch and the lens of Travis's phone, still recording from the second floor. "You're going to regret this. You don't know who you're messing with." "No," Miles said, voice low and flat. "That's what you said to the wrong damn house." The second HOA officer didn't move. He stayed on the ground, face down, hands bound, eyes wide open and blinking against the wood planks. Karen tried calling someone, probably their lawyer, probably someone who owed her a favor in city council. But reception out here was a coin toss, and her voice kept rising in frantic bursts of, "He's got a weapon," and "I'm the HOA president. I demand," before it fizzled into static. 10 minutes passed like a loaded spring. Kowalski stood guard by the restrained man. Miles kept Karen from bolting. Travis streamed every word of it live to an encrypted backup channel. No one raised their voice. No one fired a shot. But the tension was coiled tight enough to snap bone. When the sheriff's car finally crunched up the gravel drive, flashing red and blue in the morning light, nobody moved, except Karen, who immediately started rehearsing her version of events under her breath, like a prayer she knew wouldn't save her. The first cruiser crept up my driveway at a cautious crawl, tires crackling over gravel like someone walking on broken glass. Behind it followed a second, both lights spinning quietly in that slow, ceremonial way that meant they weren't sure if they were pulling into a crime scene or a sitcom. I parked my truck off to the side and stepped out just as the lead deputy emerged. Sheriff Glenn McCall, late 50s, no-nonsense kind of guy, the sort who'd once hauled a guy out of a swamp for poaching and then helped him fill out his fishing license the next week. We'd crossed paths before, mostly through range certifications and emergency response meetings. When he saw me, he nodded with something between confusion and recognition. "Ryan," he said, looking past me toward the porch. "The hell am I walking into?" "A constitutional disaster," I replied, jerking my thumb toward the porch. "Trespass, property damage, false authority, and one guy on the deck in cuffs because he shoved a Marine with a rifle." He raised an eyebrow. "The usual HOA drama, then." We walked together toward the porch where Kowalski still stood, calm as a statue, next to the zip-tied man who'd finally stopped mumbling. Karen was pacing in circles like a malfunctioning Roomba, phone still in hand, trying every angle of the yard for a bar of reception and divine intervention. Miles handed over the ID copies and a flash drive. Video evidence. Time-stamped. High-res. Full audio. McCall took the flash and looked around. Everybody calm. Nobody's been harmed, I said. But you're going to want to listen to what they claimed gave them authority to break my lock and enter my land. Karen stormed forward like she'd been waiting for her cue. Sheriff, thank God. These men are armed. They restrained one of my staff. This is a hostage situation. McCall didn't even flinch. Ma'am, slow down. Who are you? Karen Lewis, president of Emerald Canyon Estates HOA. We received multiple community complaints about this property. I was performing a scheduled inspection. We have authority. McCall sighed like a man who just sat in something wet. You have authority over your HOA, not over private land that doesn't belong to it. This is Ryan's property. I know for a fact it's not under Emerald Canyon jurisdiction. Karen's face dropped half a tone. That's not accurate. Our records show that this lot is part of our Phase 3 expansion boundary. Your records, I cut in, holding up my phone. Don't overwrite county records. I handed him a laminated copy of my parcel map, county seal and all, with a red marker. Line highlighting where Emerald Canyon ends. My lot sat well outside of it. 9 acres of firm legal independence, granted and documented. McCall scanned the page, then looked at Karen. Did you have a warrant, a court order, permission? We had complaints, she snapped. About generators, about unapproved structures, about weapons stored on site. And none of those things give you legal right to bypass a locked gate, McCall replied, especially not without contacting my office first. Karen tried to talk over him, but her voice was losing altitude fast. She shifted to her backup plan. Victimhood. We felt unsafe. The individuals inside were aggressive, armed. They threatened us. Is that on the tape? McCall asked, turning to Travis. Every second, Travis confirmed, dropping a second flash drive into the sheriff's palm. Nobody made a threat. They made clear, lawful statements. The only one who got physical was Mr. Elbow to the chest over there. The zip-tied guy looked like he wanted to shrink into the woodwork. A second deputy approached. Sir, just spoke with dispatch. This property is not listed under any HOA. Confirmed with zoning. Karen's voice cracked, but I was told by our legal counsel that the overlay district. McCall cut her off. Ma'am, you're not under arrest. Yet. But this is now an active investigation. I'm going to need all 3 of you to come with us voluntarily. If you refuse, I'll detain you. Karen looked ready to explode. The 2 officers with her, one zip-tied, one visibly sweating, both nodded in defeated silence. You, McCall turned to me. Filing charges. You bet your badge I am, I said. Trespassing, damage to property, attempted unlawful entry, and possibly impersonation of an officer. That lock they cut off? Industrial grade. Not cheap. He nodded grimly. We'll process them downtown. I'll call in the DA's office. You want to preserve this scene for civil court? I've already got backups of the video stored off-site, I said. I'll email it to the county within the hour. As the HOA trio were loaded into the cruisers, Karen still muttering about false maps and legal mistakes, I stood at the edge of the porch and watched them drive away. Travis came down from the second floor. That woman really tried to inspect your house like it was a hotel room she didn't like. She picked the wrong weekend, I muttered. She picked the wrong Marines. I thought foolishly that once they'd been hauled off the property in squad cars, things would quiet down. But Karen Lewis wasn't the type to go quietly or go home. Less than 48 hours later, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox, delivered by hand, no less, by some poor mail carrier who looked like he'd seen better neighborhoods. It was a formal summons to appear before the Emerald Canyon Estates Compliance Committee regarding alleged violations of community code, including improper storage of hazardous materials, unauthorized perimeter fortifications, and military-grade surveillance equipment used in violation of HOA privacy expectations. It would have been funny if it weren't soaked in real legal language. Stamped. Signed. With an attached packet full of low-resolution photos of my property, my house, my generator, the greenhouse, and even the roof-mounted drone pad I hadn't used in 2 years. all taken from outside the boundary fence, and all with red circles and captions like "Possible Violation, Unlicensed Tower Structure." The last photo was a blurry night shot of what looked like my chimney and was ominously labeled "Unknown Device." I called my lawyer. He laughed, but not for long. "They're trying to build a paper trail," he said, flipping through the scanned pages. "If they can create the appearance of repeated non-compliance, even falsely, they'll argue your property falls under some extended municipal interest. It's garbage, but if no one pushes back, it sticks." I didn't just push back. I brought a backhoe. First thing Monday morning, I filed a formal complaint with the county recorder's office and submitted certified copies of my deed, zoning map, and HOA exclusion affidavit. Then I requested an official investigation into HOA overreach, citing the unlawful entry, the forged expansion map Karen referenced during her arrest, and their sudden compliance violations as retaliatory action. But that wasn't enough. Something didn't sit right. Karen had moved too fast, too prepared. Those photos weren't taken in a day. That inspection packet hadn't been thrown together on a whim. This had been in the works, which meant mine wasn't the only property they'd targeted. So I started making calls. 3 hours later, I was on a conference call with Tony Behrens, a retired engineer who owned a wooded lot 2 miles north. He'd gotten a similar HOA notice 6 months back and ignored it, then found a freshly printed compliance citation nailed to a tree on his property. No signature, no contact number, just a fine demand and a deadline. He thought it was a prank. Then came the threats. Mailed notices from the HOA citing escalation protocols, warnings about liens, even one letter claiming he could be forcibly disconnected from shared power infrastructure. He was fully off-grid. Another owner, Dana Price, told me Karen had shown up on her front steps last fall with 2 clipboard-toting men and told her she had 48 hours to remove all non-compliant fencing or face enforcement action. Dana refused. 2 nights later, someone cut a 20-foot gap in her fence. The cops never found out who. She eventually gave in and joined the HOA, just to make it stop. It was a pattern, and a nasty one. Worse yet, I found one of the complaints against me, cited in the HOA's paperwork as being from a concerned neighbor, was allegedly written by a woman named Margaret Dean. Problem was, Margaret had passed away nearly 3 years ago. Her property had been unoccupied since, and no one had submitted forwarding information. I requested a copy of the original complaint form and handwriting sample from HOA archives. Denied, of course. They claimed the form was digitally compiled and confidential. I already knew that meant it never existed. I compiled everything: photocopies, scanned notices, witness statements from Tony and Dana, and a hard copy of the parcel boundary maps, and took it to the sheriff's office. I wanted it on record that this wasn't just about trespassing. This was a sustained, fraudulent campaign of intimidation against property owners outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Sheriff McCall agreed. Grim-faced and stone-voiced, he flipped through the photos of the fake complaint letters and whistled when he reached the Margaret Dean form. "She died in 2022, he muttered. "I was at the funeral. This is bold." Then he looked up. "Let's take the gloves off, Ryan. This is starting to look a hell of a lot like criminal conspiracy." I nodded once. "Then it's time we start treating it like one. If Karen Lewis thought her little paper war would force me to back down, she'd made a fatal miscalculation. What she didn't count on was that I knew exactly how to respond, methodically, legally, and with a vengeance sharpened by years of chasing fugitives and building airtight case files. Within 48 hours, I'd submitted a formal complaint to the county district attorney's office, including a dossier more robust than most mid-level prosecution cases. It included drone photos of property lines, copies of HOA maps Karen had used in her fake compliance letter, video of the forced entry, witness statements from Dana and Tony, and a notarized affidavit from Margaret Dean's niece confirming that her aunt had been dead since April of 2022, the same woman who had supposedly submitted a complaint against me 2 weeks prior. Then I took a step further. I contacted the County Land Use Department and requested a full audit of Emerald Canyon Estates' HOA activities over the past 3 years. That lit a fire. Turns out mine wasn't the first complaint, but it was the most complete. Several others had tried before. Piecemeal, scattered, emotional appeals with no documentation. What I gave them was different. I gave them a pattern. By the end of the week, I got a call from a senior investigator at the district attorney's office. Her name was Lee Sandoval, and she didn't waste time with niceties. "Mr. Texton," she said, "I've reviewed the packet. This isn't just abuse of power. This could be criminal fraud. The use of forged complaints, falsified boundary claims, impersonation of code enforcement. It's enough to trigger a multi-agency task force if it checks out." "It checks out," I told her. "And I'll help you prove it." She paused. "You military?" "Former federal marshal with a few Marines on standby." "Good, because this is going to get ugly." And it did. The next week, I was called to testify before a special zoning board review panel. This wasn't some local HOA meeting in a church basement. This was a formal county hearing with press coverage and elected officials in attendance. Karen showed up, of course, in a white blazer and oversized sunglasses like she was trying to cosplay as an ambassador under siege. She brought 2 attorneys and had the nerve to glare at me like I was the villain. I took the stand calmly and laid out the timeline. I explained how Karen had entered my land without permission, destroyed property, and claimed authority she didn't possess. I played the audio of her ordering her flunkies to take pictures and conduct inspections. Then I handed over documents proving I wasn't in the HOA. Never had been, never would be. I showed them how her so-called complaints were fabricated, even forged in the name of the dead. Karen's lawyers objected, claimed hearsay, claimed misinterpretation, claimed their client was acting on good faith advice from counsel. The room wasn't buying it. Then came the best part. Halfway through the hearing, a whistleblower stepped forward. Marcus Dell, a former junior HOA board member who'd resigned 6 months ago for personal reasons. Turns out those reasons involved watching Karen cook up enforcement campaigns against non-HOA properties and use HOA funds to pay for lock cutters, private surveillance drones, and even a retainer agreement with a small private security firm that had since gone mysteriously bankrupt. Marcus brought emails, meeting notes, voice recordings. One clip had Karen saying, "If we pressure them just hard enough, show up unannounced, snap photos, imply violations, they'll cave and sign. Fear is cheaper than lawsuits." The room fell silent. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The damage was done. The board chair thanked me and Marcus for our testimony. Then she turned to Karen and her attorneys and informed them that the county was officially launching a joint investigation, fraud, unauthorized use of public resources, possible harassment and coercion, and potential civil rights violations. Karen didn't speak. She stood, turned, and walked out like a dying star imploding under its own delusion. No more outrage. No more performance. Just that look in her eyes, the kind people wear when they realize they aren't invincible anymore. But I wasn't done. As soon as I stepped outside, reporters swarmed. A few shouted questions. I ignored most of them. One woman shoved a mic in my face and asked, "Mr. Texton, what do you say to other homeowners dealing with HOA overreach?" I turned to her and said flatly, "Know your rights. Know your land. And if someone cuts your lock and walks in like they own the place, don't argue. Document. Then let the law do its job." The fallout came faster than I expected. Within 72 hours of the zoning board hearing, the Emerald Canyon Estates HOA went into full damage control mode. Their website vanished. Their Facebook group went private. And the community bulletin board, where Karen used to post her weekly compliance reminders like divine commandments, was suddenly wiped clean. The corkboard stripped bare as if erasing evidence could reverse a timeline. Then came the real comedy, a mass mailing distributed to every household in the HOA jurisdiction. Glossy paper, official-looking logo at the top, and a letter titled Clarification Regarding Recent Misinformation. It was 4 pages of defensive rambling. They blamed coordinated disinformation campaigns, denied any knowledge of unlawful entry onto properties, and claimed the entire situation was being grossly exaggerated by individuals seeking notoriety. In a bold font paragraph halfway down, it even stated, "The HOA has always acted in accordance with community standards and within the bounds of its chartered responsibilities. No board member has ever sanctioned unlawful surveillance, entry, or enforcement outside our legal authority." Of course, they didn't mention the whistleblower or the forged complaints, or the fact that their president had been caught on video ordering her inspectors to break a lock and search a home that wasn't even within their jurisdiction. But that wasn't even the best part. 2 days later, Marcus Dell called me again. "They're trying to shred everything," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I just heard from a friend on the inside. They rented a mobile shredding truck, not for archives, for board documents, meeting records, financial ledgers." "You're serious?" "They scheduled it for this Friday. Quiet, no email blast, no resident memo. They're doing it off the HOA maintenance lot." I didn't even hesitate. I made 2 calls, one to Sheriff McCall, the other to Lee Sandoval. Both gave the same answer: stall them. They'd get a judge. That Friday morning, I drove over to Emerald Canyon's maintenance yard, not on their property, of course, but on a public trail access road that overlooked it. And there it was, a bright red industrial shred truck parked behind the utility shed, humming quietly like it wasn't about to become a felony. 2 men were hauling boxes, bankers, boxes sealed, unlabeled. Paper spilled out from one as it tipped, revealing ledgers, envelopes, and one very recognizable HOA letterhead. Karen wasn't there, but 2 of her board loyalists were, Mike Dalton and Susan Frazier. Both were on the zoning panel's radar already, but clearly hadn't gotten the memo that obstructing justice with a shredder wasn't a great look. I snapped photos from the ridge, called Sandoval again. She answered immediately. "We're en route," she said. "Hold position. Do not engage." 10 minutes later, 2 Black County SUVs and a cruiser came down the access road like something out of a low-budget Sting movie. The shredding truck stopped mid-cycle. Deputies surrounded the site. One man tried to argue he was just a contractor, but he was holding a folder that read HOA. March 2023 minutes, Yoon approved, in thick Sharpie. Not his best defense. Dalton and Frazier looked like ghosts in khakis. It didn't take long. Deputies seized the truck, boxed the remaining materials, and carted everything off under evidence seals. Susan tried to claim it was a routine cleanup, but nobody shreds evidence in a panic unless they're afraid of what's in it. Later that day, I got a call from a local reporter. Turns out word had gotten out about the shredding truck. The county issued a public statement confirming that an investigation was underway and that multiple HOA board members were now considered persons of interest in an obstruction case. Karen, meanwhile, had gone dark. No statements, no appearances. She hadn't been seen in public since the hearing. Rumor had it she'd lawyered up and left town for a retreat. Someone claimed they saw her at a ski lodge in Aspen. Whatever the case, the walls were closing in. And just in case they needed a final nudge, I had something else in store. The hard drive. When Karen's crew broke into my property, Travis had set up a secondary camera rig inside the house. It wasn't part of the usual security feed. It had captured crystal clear audio of Karen walking into my kitchen, pointing at the gun cabinet and saying, "Let's mark this for removal." That can be our first violation. Unaware she was being recorded, smiling. I copied the footage onto 3 separate drives and hand-delivered one to Sandoval. She didn't smile, but her voice cracked just enough to let something through when she said, "Thank you. This will help a lot." It was a Tuesday when everything broke loose. I was standing in my workshop tuning the generator inverter when my phone lit up with 3 messages at once. One from Marcus, one from Lee Sandoval, and one from an old neighbor I barely spoke to. The message from Marcus was just 3 words. They got her. Sandoval's was longer, more formal. Karen Lewis taken into custody. Search warrants being executed. You'll be contacted for formal deposition. I checked the 3rd message. A blurry picture of Karen, arms behind her back, being escorted across a driveway by 2 plainclothes deputies. Her face wasn't angry. It was just blank. Hollow. The performance was finally over. That day set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. By noon, the sheriff's office had raided the HOA office, which turned out to be a converted guest house on Karen's property. Inside, they found a server rack, dozens of file boxes, surveillance footage archives, and a personal compliance database Karen had been keeping for years. It included photos, complaint drafts, recordings, and notes on target homes, properties like mine, Dana's, Tony's, and at least a dozen others marked with red highlights and notes like "doesn't cooperate" or "resisting pressure." But the real bombshell? A series of flagged payments made from the HOA General Fund to a private security contractor that no longer existed. The company had dissolved, but the money trail led to a shell corporation registered under the name of Karen's brother-in-law, someone she had once described at a neighborhood BBQ as an old IT guy with a shady mustache. That was enough for the DA too. file additional charges, misuse of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit fraud, and organized harassment. It didn't stop with Karen. Susan Frazier was picked up the next morning right outside her yoga class. Mike Dalton turned himself in later that day, accompanied by a lawyer who looked like he knew he was in for a long month. Then came the subpoenas. Half the HOA board was dragged in for questioning. A few tried to deny everything. One cracked and admitted Karen held informal shadow meetings where they discussed non-compliant properties and how to strategically motivate residents to join the association, even if it required soft entry. That phrase stuck. It would be repeated again and again in the media. Lee kept me in the loop. She sent me a copy of the arrest warrant, 42 pages long, and redacted transcripts of internal communications. I read through every word. Karen had orchestrated everything: the fake complaints, the forced inspections, the intimidation campaigns. She had even drafted a proposal to absorb adjacent non-member parcels into a new extended compliance corridor. Legal nonsense dressed up to sound legitimate. It was all about power. She'd been trying to expand her fiefdom one backyard at a time. As the investigation deepened, the county froze all HOA accounts. Residents panicked. Some called me in a frenzy, demanding to know if they had to move, if they could sell, if the HOA was going to collapse. I told them the truth. It already has. The final blow came a week later when the DA announced a full civil suit against Emerald Canyon Estates HOA, seeking restitution for all affected property owners. Damages were projected in the 7-figure range. They offered me a formal role as lead complainant, given my documentation and involvement. I accepted. My lawyer filed our independent civil claim the next day: malicious trespass, property damage, violation of Fourth Amendment protections, harassment, defamation, and attempted fraudulent jurisdictional overreach. The claim was strong enough that several of the board's insurers refused coverage, citing willful misconduct. That meant every board member would now be personally liable. Karen remained silent throughout her arraignment. No interviews, no quotes. Just the click of cuffs and the shuffle of designer heels on courthouse floors. They say power corrupts, but in Karen's case, it wasn't power that did her in. It was the illusion of it, and the moment she thought she could enforce fantasy-like law. And I still had one final move to make. A month after Karen's arrest, I stood in my driveway watching the installation crew bolt a new titanium lock onto my gate. Laser cut, weatherproof, tamper-resistant, rated to withstand more brute force than most police battering rams. It gleamed like a monument. I had it custom engraved. Private property, Marines inside, try again. No one had tried again. Not since the arrest. Not since the hearings. Not since the HOA's office was liquidated, its assets frozen, and the organization officially declared dissolved pending litigation. The neighborhood changed fast after that. With Karen gone, the Emerald Canyon Estates HOA didn't just fall apart, it imploded. Members started arguing among themselves. Lawsuits flew back and forth over dues, landscaping contracts, even petty things like mailbox paint colors. Without their self-appointed queen, the structure collapsed under its own fake authority. People who had once parroted Karen's orders suddenly claimed they never agreed with her methods. A few even sent me letters of apology, some handwritten, most sheepish. Dana and Tony, they've become local legends. Dana started a blog called Free Range Neighborhood, where she documents HOA horror stories from across the country. Tony is considering a run for city council. Travis, Miles, and Kowalski returned for another weekend, not to guard my home this time, but to grill steaks, drink bourbon, and laugh about the look on Karen's face when she realized the game was up. We watched the sunset from the bunker rooftop, rifles leaning unused nearby, and for the first time in months, I felt like the land was truly mine again. Lee Sandoval kept her promise. With the evidence from the hard drive and Marcus's whistleblowing, she secured convictions. Karen Lewis got 12 years, 8 without parole. Susan and Mike took plea deals, 6 years and 4, respectively. Restitution was ordered to victims, with my civil claim landing at $1.3 million. The county agreed to establish a task force to investigate HOA misconduct statewide. That part made me smile, but I didn't keep the money. Well, not all of it. I took enough to upgrade my security systems, reinforce the bunker, and pay off the last of the mortgage. The rest went into a fund, a nonprofit, something I'd wanted to do for a long time but never had a reason to until now. We called it Landline. free legal aid for homeowners bullied by HOAs. We set up a toll-free hotline, volunteer lawyers, former officers, even a few sympathetic judges offered guidance behind the scenes. We help people fight back, quietly, legally, strategically, just like I did. I never went looking for war, but when it came to my door, cutting locks, walking in like they owned the place, I fought it on my terms. And I won. The Constitution doesn't start with an HOA charter. It starts with we the people. And this people, he's just getting started.